Back in here to Live Now from Fox, I am Andy Mack. We are just about 24 hours since this double-sided ceasefire took place, and already both sides are accusing one another of violating the framework of this deal. And one major component condition for this ceasefire was the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. For more on this, let's go out right now to Jennifer Griffin with this report.
What's been stated is the strait is open.
Just hours after agreeing to a 2-week ceasefire and allowing at least 4 ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's state media reported it would block the strait as long as Israel continues attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. It also wants a toll, $1 per barrel, passing through the strait. A typical oil tanker carries 2 million barrels. The White House says President Trump was told privately the strait is open. At a Pentagon briefing, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs outlined what Operation Epic Fury destroyed after the U.S. military hit 13,000 targets in 38 days.
CENTCOM forces destroyed approximately 80% of Iran's air defense systems, striking more than 1,500 air defense targets, more than 450 ballistic missile storage facilities, 800 one-way attack drones storage facilities. All of these systems are gone.
What General Kane did not mention were the percent of American weapons stockpiles emptied and costly U.S. warplanes lost. 3 F-15Es shot down in a friendly fire incident in Kuwait, a 4th shot down in Iran. 1 A-10, over 16 MQ-9 Reaper drones, 2 MC-130J transport planes, and 4 light special operations helicopters, totaling more than $900 million in losses.
I've laid out the statistics, but it does not truly capture the nature of combat. This is gritty and unforgiving business.
CENTCOM says 50,000 U.S. service members, 16 warships, and a dozen air squadrons are staying.
A ceasefire is a pause, and the joint force remains ready if ordered or called upon to resume combat operations.
The U.S. military carried out a closing salvo of 800 airstrikes last night in Iran. At the end of 38 days of bombing, Iran still has 900 pounds of highly enriched weapons-grade uranium. Says it preserves the right to enrichment, has enough drones and missiles to threaten to close the strait, and despite a large number of strikes on Iran's leaders, the regime and the IRGC remain. In Washington, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
And we also know later on this week, VP J.D. Vance, Witkoff, Kushner will participate in some of those negotiations in Islamabad on Saturday morning local time. This according to the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Let's be joined right now by White House correspondent for Reuters, Trevor Honeycutt. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And we talk about this, the chippiness, as Defense Secretary says it takes time for a ceasefire to take hold. Is the White House still optimistic about this in this 2-week time frame?
So they are. I mean, we heard from Caroline Leavitt as well today that essentially ceasefires are always going to be fragile, and you're going to have to kind of give a little bit of time for this to take effect. So we'll see if that happens. I think the broader question here is just essentially, is this a real ceasefire? And do Iranians have the same expectations as the White House about this?
Yeah, that is a very big question. Another question is around Lebanon and whether they are actually involved in all of this. What's the stance by the United States? Because we heard from Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, saying they're going to continue to strike Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy group. Is Lebanon involved in this? Are there two sides in consensus about that?
The White House says that Lebanon is not a part of this deal and that they've communicated that to all the parties of the ceasefire. But that is clearly going to be an issue here during these 2 weeks is whether Hezbollah, which we know is allied with Iran, whether they're going to allow these attacks to continue without bringing Iran back into this fight.
Yeah, that is a very big question. Of course, that they're just north of the Israel border. I do want to ask you, because we do know those negotiations are going to take place later on this week. Again, it's going to be led by VP J.D. Vance, along with Steve Witkoff and Kushner, 2 other names that are very familiar with these talks. How much is that Trump saying in support of J.D. Vance, and why do you think he picked him to take the lead on this?
Well, so it's really interesting to see J.D. Vance, who's not necessarily been front and center during this war, kind of coming to the fore here and having a bigger role in this. It kind of makes sense as the person who was kind of least, in favor of moving forward with this conflict, that he would be the one who would be tasked with kind of bringing it to an end and bringing it to a close. And so it is an opportunity, I think, politically for the vice president to come out and stake his own position about this Iran conflict and how the U.S. should be handling this issue going forward. So I think it's really interesting to see how he's going to be different from Donald Trump on this issue.
And we know that there are going to be some sticking points. The 15-point plan for the United States, very different from the 10-point plan from Iran. What could be the main points that these two sides don't see eye to eye on?
Number one is nuclear enrichment, right? Can Iran move forward with nuclear enrichment, and at what level? And will the United States tolerate that in any way? There's no agreement between the sides that I've seen on that issue. And then also, who controls the Strait of Hormuz? Who is that now Iran's responsibility? Can they charge tolls for using that passageway or not?
Yeah, that is a very big point, that energy choke point. We talk about it, and that's also a point of contention whether or not it is open. But talking about some of these negotiations and that nuclear enrichment, is that a red line for the United States that they cannot have enrichment? Is that a go or no-go for this Trump administration?
The White House reiterated today that is a red line, that the president does not want to see nuclear enrichment, and that he will not agree to any deal that allows Iran to develop the fissile material that they would need for a nuclear bomb.
And you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. They said it would potentially be unacceptable, Caroline Leavitt did, if they did not reopen. At what capacity is acceptable for this White House? Is it just a few tankers? Is it full 100% reopening?
Well, they said today that they think that the Strait of Hormuz should be open fully, which it clearly is not now. They said that there is more traffic. We have not seen a lot of evidence of a lot of traffic moving through there, but they said they just want it free and open at this point, which it is not. And the Iranian statement, clearly couched what they were saying as not free and clear, right? That any movement would have to take place in coordination with Iran. So we're not back to an open strait yet.
And we've seen President Trump, his disappointment in other allies, including from NATO, and President Trump on Truth Social saying NATO wasn't there when we needed them and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. So obviously he's talked about Greenland a time or two, but talking about what's going on in the Middle East, are there conversations happening about the future of NATO and whether the United States will be part?
Absolutely. So the president hosted the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, at the White House today. We just heard from Mark Rutte within the hour, and he says that the president was very disappointed with NATO and that he expressed that in a private meeting. And Rutte said that he understood where Trump was coming from to some degree about NATO members not being fully cooperative with the Iran mission, even though they benefited from the results. So clearly there are discussions happening. Rutte was at the White House for over 2 hours. Clearly, they're having some very detailed discussions about what the future of NATO looks like and what Washington's role in it is going to be.
Is there any movement in terms of NATO helping reopen the Strait of Hormuz because the Trump administration doesn't want Iran to control it, to have those tolls? Is NATO going to step in any capacity and help get tankers through?
So what I've been told by European officials here is that they are not at all ready to join an operation to clear the strait at this time because there's still no clarity that the hostilities have ended. And that's a key point for them, that they don't want to be in an active shooting war here. They'll come into the strait and help with the cleanup process, but it needs to be after the war has ended. And I've also heard that the European leaders did not tell Mark Rutte to promise Donald Trump that they would be assisting anytime soon.
And just to wrap this up, because a double-sided ceasefire, it has been chippy so far. We've seen lobs of bombs kind of both ways already. This is a delicate ceasefire. What are you watching over the next few days, and what would it mean for the United States to snap back and say this thing is over?
We really need, from the global economy, U.S. economy perspective, we need the Strait open, right, in terms of where oil prices are. That's really the thing that hits American consumers quickest and fastest, right in their pocketbooks. And so we really need to see movements of tankers and ships through that strait to really see this conflict come to an end. And then we also need to see, a cessation to the bombings, right? We need to see that Iran is not bombing its neighbors, and that they aren't being bombed by Israel.
Yeah, and obviously everyone coming to the table, so we'll see what it looks like in Islamabad with VP J.D. Vance and others there for those talks. Trevor Honeycutt, thank you so much. Appreciate your time here on Live Now.
谢谢收看，请关注外星人点看的频道哦。